All right, so I'm Joey Hartledge. I have with me Corbin Harris. Corbin and I talked about a week ago about doing a marathon recap of his most recent marathon race. And I'm happy to be able to kind of talk with him a little bit about this here on this platform. So if people really want to jump in, kind of hear a little bit more personal setting from Corbin, I'm just going to ask a few questions throughout. He's going to share all about it. But yeah, so we kind of get going, get started. Corbin, tell me a little about yourself, what you do, your background in running. What are you doing these days?
Yeah. Well, first off, I appreciate you reaching out and sort of setting this up, something that's sort of cool to share my story a little bit. And sort of, I hope if people are to go through and watch this, they can sort of take some insight. And if they have any like training questions or things like that, this may be able to answer some of that, or they can just reach out through that. But now I'm at Campbellsville coaching track and cross country, absolutely loving it. I started running when I was in fourth grade, went out to cross country practice at our elementary school because it was at my piano teacher's house and I wanted to go out there. And then I ended up practicing and was the fastest kid there. And so that's sort of how I sort of got started, because I was a fast kid. Didn't really honestly love running for a long time. I liked competing and I liked doing it because I was good at it. But even throughout much of high school and my first probably year or so in college, running wasn't something that I loved to do for the love of the sport. I loved baseball, loved to play baseball because I loved the sport of baseball. But running was something I did because I loved the people that I was around. But then I love competing. I've been a competitor in every single thing that I'm in. And so didn't really fall in love with it until I really came to college. Freshman and sophomore year, still struggled with the mileage a little bit and just going out there and making myself do runs. But I did it because I'm one that if you tell me to do something, I'm going to do it regardless. But I really just fell in love with the guys at Campbellsville. And I knew I had to put the work in because I had a big group of people relying on me to do so. Everyone else was sort of doing the work that way. But really my junior year, that summer, I really started to amp up my mileage. Really just fell in love with the process. I'm one who, for most of my life, I've been very results and numbers just oriented, and that's what drove me. But since my junior year, especially just in running, I started being motivated just by the process of going through everything, and really more of an intrinsic development. I felt like if I just put the work in, I felt more of just a satisfaction. Even if I didn't hit my specific goals that I wanted for myself, there's just less frustrations if I know that I put everything in that I had, that I could. And so my junior year started amping up mileage a little bit. Still wasn't, for a collegiate runner, I still wasn't a mileage hog or anything, running 65, 70 miles a week. But really that showed some drastic improvements in my time. So felt like I had a solid junior season with track and cross country. And then my senior year is when I told myself, like, it's my last year. We're gonna see what's gonna happen. I'm gonna put in as much work as I can, whether it's running, biking, swimming, lifting, core. And I came in to cross country season in really good shape, probably in a little too good of shape, to where I felt like I almost could have peaked at the beginning of the season. Luckily, Coach Lakes and Coach Ford, they really, they know how to train people. They've been doing it. They did it for a long time, and really got us to peak at the right time. We went out and did well at cross country nationals, and that was where I hit my peak for cross country season, right when you want to. And then following that, coming off the high of a 30-second PR, my last ever cross country race, I told myself, like, all right, winter training, I'm going to really dive into it. I'm going to run the mileage that I can and a little bit more on top of that. As much as I hate the cold, I went out there and did it. I started just loving running just to run, whether it was for a specific purpose or not. And I really started taking care of my body outside of just running, nutritionally, what I thought was taking care of my body. Ended up losing a bunch of weight that way, unintentionally. it's aided my running in the long term, but short term, it was very, very unhealthy. Definitely a learning process through all of that. That's the story for a different day. But from there, had a solid senior season in track, specialized in the 5K, 3K, more the longer distance events on the track. And then after I graduated, Brett Crawford and I had always talked about wanting to run Boston together. And so both of us still, like, we were like, oh man, marathon's a long way. The farthest we had really ever run was like probably 16 to 18 miles, maybe. I think 16 was my max outside of or throughout college. But we graduated, and as much as we were really, really busy over the summer, trying to just fresh out of college, working a lot, we trained similarly, but also sort of on our own just because of our busy schedules. I was working 70, 80 hours a week, driving an hour, 2 hours each day to and from jobs. But we were like, all right, we're going to go out. We found a marathon. It was the latest marathon you could find before Boston registration opened. And so we signed up for it. We told ourselves that we we're going to do one, run Boston, and be done, and call it quits and retire.
Yep.
And for me, it didn't really happen that way. I trained. I loved the process of training. I mean, even though I was so busy that summer, waking up, getting 12 to 15 miles in every morning, then going to work. Like, it was a thing of God, honestly, that I didn't absolutely burn myself out in running or get injured just with how much I was working and the lack of sleep and different things like that. But I went in, had a solid first marathon, ended up running 2:38, which was way under my goal. Goal was just to qualify for Boston. But usually you want to be at least 5 minutes under. So I was like, maybe if I can go out for like 2:45 to 2:55, that we'll see what can happen from there.
22 minutes.
Yeah. And so went out, ran it, absolutely loved it. Won the race, and it was the first real race I'd ever won in a long time. And so I got the high of marathon running. Absolutely loved it, even though it was a small marathon in Hamilton, Ohio, called the Hamilton Night Glow. I just the atmosphere. Everyone was so supportive. I love being able to run the first however long in the race and not have to worry about being out of breath. You could sit there and talk to all the volunteers. Everyone, I mean, even in a small town, they had lawn chairs just sitting on the side of the road so they can sit out there and cheer you on. And so, I mean, marathons are special in general because of that. And I've fallen in love with that atmosphere. People want to support you for your goals. They're not even people that go and show up to cheer on someone specific. Usually if you run by them, they're going to cheer you on too. People know that it's a different sort of grind to get through those long races. And I mean, just the type of support that you have out there, even if it's your fellow competitors, like, everyone's pulling for each other to run their best. It's not, even though you have some of that head-to-head competition, especially in the front of the race where there's prize money on the line, everyone's pulling for each other, and it's just a special atmosphere. And I've absolutely fallen in love with it. After that first one at Hamilton, obviously didn't get to run Boston because of COVID, but we're moving there in the fall. And so it's a part of the process. So I spent a lot of time training from Hamilton, Ohio until this Utah Valley Marathon. So a lot of work went into it, months and months and months. But we were able to make it happen, and now I got big goals for Boston. I'm excited.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you sharing, especially how you started, your experience, background, struggles, the love of the sport. Well, if it's just the camaraderie, if I can't even say the word, just the chemistry, actually, I would say, of the sport itself and how much you love it and the reason why you jumped into it. And it helps that you were the fast one when you were a kid. So I'm thankful for to have been your teammate for a long time, been coworkers with you, and of course, just friends this whole time as well, too, to be able to kind of hear your story, especially be able to do it through here, even though I know we already had some coffee about it, talked about it briefly, but I'm glad to hear a little bit more in depth and kind of share with everyone else. So, all right, let's kind of jump right into the race. One of my first questions I had was, tell me about the Utah Valley Marathon. Like, what attracted you to this specific race, And was it your first time out west for like a race, or even just to go out west?
Um, I had been out to Salt Lake before on a school trip. So I mean, being with a big group, it's not like you get to see a whole lot.
Yeah.
But I mean, we got to do a few things out there. It was with DECA in high school, freshman year of high school, so a long time. But outside of that, this is my first time out west, and I absolutely loved it. I sort of chose this marathon mainly because it was about the only one I could find, to be completely honest. I've been doing a lot of work all spring, really doing a lot of training with Jacob Hamilton, who is our NAI qualifier in the marathon, and trying to it helped me that I could coach him through workouts and run with him to get my workouts in as well. And B, I just told myself, I'm like, man, if I'm out here doing all this work, like I want to hop in a race too. There were all kinds of races in the spring. I would honestly, just for a preferential like timeline and running a marathon and then starting back training for Boston, I would have loved to get one in early April, or anytime in April, honestly, something before June. But I mean, having meets every weekend and coaching and all that was definitely a priority of mine. If I wasn't able to find a race, I wasn't able to find a race. I mean, I wasn't going to take vacation and miss my athletes running. That's something that is honestly so much more important, being able to coach them and see them through their successes. Because I see all the work that they put in as well. And so didn't want to miss that. This one ended up being the first weekend after our season ended. And so we got back from Gulf Shores. And I'm like, all right, like this is that in my head. I'm like, I'm going to go to Gulf Shores, come back, load up on a plane 2 days later, head out to Utah. Didn't really know how that was going to work, just the travel fatigue. I was nervous about that a little bit. But I mean, also hit the elite standard with the times. I mean, they paid for my entry fee, so that definitely helped. I mean, going out west and I mean, it could have been an expensive trip. But I mean, I had a lot of support along the way. Stayed with Abigail Coleman's family, so didn't have to worry about hotel expenses. They helped feed me and things like that. They were absolutely amazing, letting me do a lot of special things out there that wouldn't have been possible without them. Honestly, without like their support, I wouldn't have been able to afford to go on the trip in general. Because I mean, just having to pay for a hotel or all like having to get an Uber or something just to drive from the airport to where the marathon was being held would have, I mean, it's about 45 minutes to an hour difference. I mean, like those drives are going to be expensive, different things like that. So that was sort of why I chose to go out there, and it ended up working out perfectly just in my schedule. And that's sort of how I pick most of my marathons, is what's going to be the ideal one for my schedule. If I have to travel, I have to travel. I love traveling and going new places, and I mean, running's the way that I want to see the world. But I mean, I knew this was a big one that had a lot of success, and it seemed to be a fast marathon and a fast race in general, especially for it being in early June. I mean, you're not going to find any on the East Coast because of the humidity. I was down between that one and then the Governor's Cup Marathon in Montana. But that Montana trip was just going to be a little much for me. And that one took place yesterday, I believe. And so just another week later, that would have been a week pushed back from starting Boston training. And so the Utah Valley just worked out perfectly time-wise. And then, I mean, it just helped that I had some support and had some help out there that sort of was able to make the trip possible that way.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. And I think one of my number one things I definitely took away from that when you first shared when you went to Utah, saying the Coleman family and a few others kind of helped you out with like not just meals, but everything else. But just, I love hearing that, especially just seeing a passion of yours, or even just a passion of ours, whether it be running, or just when people come together to share, to help you out on your passion, whether it's running or just accomplish something internally or for a bigger purpose. I think it's really cool when all that comes
Yeah,
together. So,
exactly. It was crazy. Because I'd mentioned it to Abigail. I was just like, hey, like, all I'm asking, I was like, can you get someone, I don't care if it's a friend or what, I was like, I will pay them if they pick me up from the airport and take me to a hotel. And he's like, Corbin, I live there. You can stay at my house. And I'm like, well, I mean, I'm not going to say no. Like, I'm not going to argue. And it ended up being so much better of an experience. They are an amazing family. Cooked dinner for me every night. And her grandma packed me snacks to take to the race, or even when I went out to Park City and like did my pre-race runs. Like she always made sure I had a snack pack to take with me, different, like little things like that made it just so much
The
special.
little things that happen.
Exactly.
Experience.
Exactly. It was amazing. I mean, they were able to tell me where I should go see, and they took me to different places that I wouldn't have even known to do otherwise. And so that helped out. It was tremendous.
Good. All right, next one. So I did a quick little research, kind of looked on the Utah Valley Marathon's website. So this is probably before you heard of the website or before you knew which race you were going into. You probably knew it was already a Boston qualifying, and just going out west, it was probably some beautiful scenery. I didn't realize it until you finished, and I saw on Strava that the net loss is like around 15 to like 1700 in elevation,
Mm-hmm.
which of course when I first saw that, I'm like, does that still qualify to be BQ at all? Which that's awesome that it still does. So kind of knowing the elevation going there, or the net elevation, net loss elevation. And I saw something else talking about there's no turns on the course after mile 7. So share a little bit about the course itself, and you can kind of walk me through the race if you want to, or just kind of share some highlights that you actually saw, or like if you had some like if like the footing was bad, or just like the scenery, like what are you going to focus on when you're running that marathon?
Okay, yeah. So I went out. I mean, I knew it was net loss, much like Boston is within itself, and so that was another thing that in my head sort of played a factor. I was like, hey, like this would. I mean, as much even I think I sort of picked the marathon and then just looked at it as a benefit that it's a net loss, much like Boston. So it just helped me get that downhill marathon practice in. But I went out the day before, wanted to see as much as I could. Whenever at this time of year in Utah, if you want to, the thing to do is go hiking. I'm like, I can't go hiking the day before marathon. So I drove around, drove up to Park City, did things like that. But then on the way back down, on the way to the convention center and the expo, I was like, I'll just drive the course because the expo was sort of over near the finish line. And so pretty much how the course went, you started on really this back like side road, led to the middle of this empty field. It mapped out perfectly that the start of that road was where the race started. And so what they did in the morning was you would park your car down at the finish line, and they would drive you up to the top, and they would just drop you off. Luckily, it was a little bit warmer when we were out there, so I didn't freeze completely. Still a little chilly once we got to the top, so they gave you space blankets, wrapped you up that way. Yeah. But then, I mean, once the race started, it's the first 7 miles are downhill, pretty heavily downhill. And I knew that going in as I drove the course. And so I talked to Cumberland University's head coach, Jim Seckel, and he had run this marathon in the past. And so I sort of asked him for some of his advices and different things like that. And that was one thing he told me about. He's like, yeah, it's net loss downhill. The first 7 miles are going to be absolute cake because of that. But he said, be careful and be wary that you don't go out too fast. Yeah. And I kept telling myself I was like, all right, I just can't go out too fast, which has never been an issue for me in marathons. Usually I'll always start probably too conservative. It's been enough to where like I have always closed really, really well. But this one, even going into it, I told myself, hey, my goal pace is 5:45. I'm going to go out at 5:45 and just see what I can hold, like see if I can hold it. Because in the past I'd be like, all right, goal pace is 6:05. I'm going to go out at 6:30 first mile, and sort of negative split that way. But this one I was like, I'm just going to try to hold 5:45 the whole time, regardless of where I'm at in the race. But knowing how easy those first few miles were, it was a constant watch check, running through those back roads, like, all right, making sure I'm not going too fast. Because I mean, the leaders were out hot. We were lining up, and I mean, it's a 26-mile race. I had to be in like the 5th row at the start because I was trying to sit like as close to the start line as I could. Because I was shooting for a top 5 finish. And we ended up getting pushed back to like the 5th row. We started 12 minutes late because they couldn't get people to move back. So they told everybody that wasn't behind the start line, they're like, y'all are just gonna have to go around. And I'm like, well, like, I don't care to be in the very front, but like, I want to be near it. And so I ended up starting like the 5th row. We took off, and there were 10 to 15 people that took off. And I say they probably went through the mile 5 flat, maybe sub 5 for some of them. It was absolutely ridiculous. I'm like, all right, this race may be a lot faster this year than it was in the past. Um, because they were out quick. But I also just kept reinforcing myself. I'm like while top 5 was my goal, just because top 5 was like that's who won the prize money and things like that. It was just like I was like, I'm gonna run my race. I can't control how fast they run. And so I kept that 5:45 in the back of my head. I'm like, I'm a strong finisher. And so the first 4 miles, I sat there, was very conservative, kept that 5:45, just checking my watch, 5:45, 5:45. Anytime I looked down, I was at 5:40. It was intentional, like I'm going to back off. But then I got in a groove with 2 or 3 guys. We sat there, ran for 2 or 3, probably around 3rd through 5th mile. We sort of ran together. One fun thing about marathon running is whenever you get in a group like that, you just run, hey, talk, and hey, like, where are you from? And sort of we're able to navigate those back few miles a little bit, talk to each other, sort of broke down the course on what we had heard from different people to sort of give each other advice for the rest of the race. And honestly, those first 5 miles absolutely flew by. I remember going through mile marker 4 and then mile marker 6, and I'm like, I was like, I hope the last few miles go about that quick, because honestly, it felt like we had run like 2 miles at that point. Like it didn't feel like we were out there for 30 minutes. Like it really felt like we maybe 20 at tops. We had already gone through 2 water stops, and water stops at the 3rd mile, and then every like odd mile from there. And so got in a groove with them. And then at mile 5, I didn't necessarily speed up, but I left that group. I think they wanted to back off a little bit more. And so I started working up to the next person in front of me, which was the women's finisher she ended up finishing 3rd. So I worked up with her, ran with her for about half mile or so. I could tell she went out hot with the leaders and was running solo. So I sort of stepped in front of her and let her run off me for another mile or 2. And then I knew mile 7 was going to be the first like goose stop and to get gel and different things like that. But I also knew that mile 7 was you're going to make that sharp turn that you had mentioned. It really wasn't sharp. It's a 90-degree turn, but when you're running whatever pace you're running, it's not a bad turn. But I also knew that from mile 7 to mile 9 is the steepest hill in the race. It was, so you're running downhill elevation. So you go, I have it on Strava, my elevation for miles 1 minus 95, 2 minus 203 feet, 3 minus 115. The rest of them are in like the 80s until I get to mile 8, mile 9, and then you start gradually increasing in the elevation a little bit. How those hills were, it was a steep hill at first, and then they would level off, slightly go down, and then go back up. And then there was sort of like 3 mini hills within one big hill. And that's where I started just making a lot of ground on people. Because I told myself, like I said, 5:45. I was like, even going uphill, I'm just going to run 5:45. Not going to worry. I'm not going to push the hills. If I run a little bit slower going up, I'm okay with that, as long as I don't feel like I'm like really pushing. So I don't want the hills to burn myself out. But also when you're running downhill for so long, the uphills are a little relieving. Just a change in the muscle groups that you're working. But as I got to the top of the first hill, I was like, man, I went out conservative. That still sucks. And that's whenever the sun was finally coming up at that point. So it's starting to get a little bit hotter. On that area, it was absolutely gorgeous. The road we were running on was a 4-lane road. But they blocked off traffic to go. They went like 2 lanes on the right side of the road. And so we had the whole other 2 lanes and the shoulder to ourselves. So we didn't, and there was a median in the middle too. So we weren't running anywhere near traffic really. But we got up, and this is where, once you get to the top of this hill, is whenever you really get into the valley, the Utah Valley, which is where the marathon gets its name. You're running beside a state park, and you have this lake that you're running along. But you get to the top of this hill, and it's a steep drop. Mile 10, it says I have a minus 107 feet elevation. So, you go from gaining elevation to an absolute just straight drop. And once I got to that mile 9, I caught up with a guy named Jeff Manning. And we sort of caught up, and he struggled up the hill a little bit more. But once we started going down the hill, we started talking and running together. And I sort of asked him about, like, hey, have you run this race before? Because he told me he was from Utah, and he's like, no, but I've run through the valley quite a bit. And so we asked about each other's goals and different things like that. And I'm actually, he helped me out a whole lot, because we're starting to run down the valley. Absolutely gorgeous. I mean, you're running mountains on both sides, but you don't have to worry about running the mountains because you're down down in the middle of them. But he started talking, and he's like, hey, like, what's your goal? I was like, A goal 235, B goal, or yeah, A goal 232, B goal 235. And he was just like, he seemed a pretty experienced marathoner. He's running Boston in the fall as well. So he already qualified, and I was like, hey, like, what about you? And his A goal was 230, B goal 235. He didn't tell me that in the time being. He just said, hey, let's just work together. Because I think if he would have told me that A goal 230, and whenever he ended up falling off and ended up leaving him, if I would have known that, it probably would have got to me like, hey, like, I don't need to be going. Like, I need to be sitting back. Yeah. Because I still don't completely trust myself in marathons, because this is only my second real one. But he just said, hey, let's work together. So we ran 4 miles together or so. But then I started picking up. And I mean, with that being downhill, I mean, we went, while I was running 5:45 for most of it, we ended up going, that time we were running together, we went 5:35, 5:38, 5:40. So we started picking up and banking a little bit of time, but that's also one of the steepest declines in the race. Yeah. So at that point, we got to mile 11 together. I started making a move a little bit, just trying to open up down the hill. It's weird because you can't really open up too much, or you're just gonna have so much pounding on your legs. So you're not going short and choppy, but you just have to find a nice medium. And then I end up passing the 2 women's leaders, one at a time, and tagged along with the women's champion a little bit, as she was running, got around her at about mile 12. And then I came through the 13th mile, and how that one went. So you're getting to the halfway mark. The half marathon started at that point, and they just ran the same course. They just ran the back half of the marathon. And so I came through. They had the clock there because just it being the halfway mark, and A goal was 232. I came through at 1:15:58, and I'm like, all right, I'm right on track. And so I was like, if I just do that again, I'll hit A goal. And I felt pretty good. Mile 11, I sort of struggled a little bit, but I mean, at this point, I'd already sort of recovered. And so I hit that 13th mile. I was like, all right, we're gonna just 232s in the bag, I think. Let's just see what we can do from here. And I knew I was a pretty strong closer. Mm-hmm. And so one thing I unintentionally noticed is throughout the races, anytime I got a goo or a water stop, I guess it mentally was just like, all right, you got some refreshment, let's speed up. Because every time that I went through one of those mile markers, I noticed I looked down, I'm running like 5:35 now. And I'm like, oh, well, like I've sped up. And it was natural. So I wasn't worried about it too much. And then I came through the halfway mark. It was a big confidence boost at that point. And I was just like, I just got to hold on. Even if I die, I'm right on it. And so I kept going down the valley. We got to mile 16 was where the next incline was. And once I was because of how steep you're going down from really from 9 all the way to 15 and a half to 16, I was looking for something flat. My thighs were really, really starting to burn. That was about it. But my thighs and my hamstring was tightening up a little bit just because it hadn't really been able to work because it's just running downhill the whole time. So I was looking for something flat, and then I see the hill coming. I'm like, I want a flat, not a hill. And so I'm running up the mile 16 hill, but ended up my 15th mile ended up being 5:27. And so that was I hit that, told myself, I'm like, all right, we're going to hit the hill. We're going to relax a little bit, get back on track with the 5:45 to 5:40. Ended up running up the hill, past another guy or so, and maintained a 5:35 to 5:40 pace up there. And literally once you get across that mile 16 hill, you are dropping from say on Strava has it mapped out at 16 and a half, you're at 5,354, you finish at 4,695. So you're that last 10 miles, you're losing almost 800 feet in elevation. And so it's a straight shot down the rest of the way. And I knew that going in, driving the course and stuff. And so I pretty much, once I crested the top of the hill, I was like, all right, it's go time. Let's see what we can do. Knowing I had 10 miles to go, it made easy math for my watch. I'm like, all right, if I can do this, I'm 230. If I do this, I'm 232. And so I just kept picking up, kept going by guys one by one. At this point, we're starting to catch some of the guys in the half marathon, or not guys, but like the walkers really from the half marathon. And so you get a little bit of support that way. But even as I'm getting tired, I'm just opening up, enjoying the crowd. That really helped me, but also the scenery. There were a lot of times where I was just looking up and was just like, it was almost just like a thankfulness. And I think that just that mindset allowed me to get through the race good as well. Just having the scene, I would look up and I would literally be like, God, I'm hurting, but thank you for just letting me be here and letting me see this, because like your glory is shown through all of this. And that whole time, like that was something that was just reoccurring in my mind. Even if I run bad, I kept telling myself like, this is going to be the prettiest race or prettiest run I've ever had, whether it's a race or not. And so it was like, I tried to like, just be thankful regardless. And that was honestly something that I've been reading a book just about mental training and mental prep, trying to overcome defeat and things like that. And that was sort of one thing that they talk about is like, you have to accept your reality in certain situations. And I haven't even finished the book. So like I started reading it really on this trip, not even intentionally like to prep for the race, but just because I just wanted to read it. And like that was a reoccurring theme, was like, all right, I'm really here. And the reality is that this place is absolutely beautiful. You're running in the valley the entire time. Trees are starting to shade you a little bit. Over to my left, I'm running past waterfalls and state parks. And so absolutely gorgeous. And the weather ended up, at least from my factor, like it ended up not being too bad. Utah was setting all kinds of record highs all week when I was there. It was 103 degrees the day before the race. When I woke up at 2 a.m. that morning to get my everything prepped, 75 degrees. And so I was like, I walked out the door. I'm like, it's going to be a hot one today. Luckily, starting at elevation, once we got to the top, it was 60 degrees. And then I actually made the last minute decision to wear my white hat. And I never raced in a hat in any like really like real race. And I'd trained in them some, but I'd never like ever thought about racing in it. The last minute decision, I was like, you know what? I should probably wear the white hat just to reflect some of that sun. And ended up doing that. But the sun ended up not being too bad. It came out the last, it was a sunny day, but where we were running and the sun was rising over the mountains, we were able to sort of run in the shade in the valley a little bit. I tried to stay on the white line to avoid some of the heat. The last few miles, the sun came out, but I didn't really notice it. But as we're coasting down from mile 20, I guess is sort of where I stopped and talked about that. Sorry to go off track, but
you're fine. That's good.
Hit mile 20, we get into Provo, and that it became a little frustrating. I passed just some marathoners. I didn't know what place I was. I would pass some half marathoners. You're in 12th place. You're in 12th place. Pass some. You're in 9th. I'm like, I haven't passed another marathoner. Like, I don't know where. Like, I had no idea where I was at.
Where am I?
Yeah. And so I got to mile 20-ish, and so I was like, I don't feel terrible. You're getting into the city, so you're starting to get a lot more crowds. But you're also, the frustrating part was with the half marathoners that were walking. The farther you get in, the more those the bigger the group of half marathons are. So I'm almost having to weave in and out sometimes of them because they're in their own race. Like they have the right to do that. It just should have been separated. Be like, hey, like half marathoners stay on this side, marathoners run on this side, just so I don't have to worry about looking out for them. And then at the same time, I'm trying to peek over them, like, do I see another runner? But I hit mile 21. I was like, all right, 5 miles to go. I was like doing my math. I was like, all right, I can go to 231 is what I still had in my head. I'm like, all right, I can go sub 231. And I'll be like, if I run this time, I'm like, this is about what I ran my 8Ks at in college. Like I feel like I'm in good shape to do that.
Crazy.
And I came across that, and I had asked the lady in front of me. She was like, great job. There's a few guys up there. I was like, how far ahead are they? She was like, or yeah, she said she was like, you're in 10th. There's two guys right up there. I said, how far ahead is everybody else? She's like, I was like, good way. She said, yep. And I'm like, all right, I'll just go after them. And so I ended up, I wasn't 10th, it was 12th at that time. But I ended up like chasing them down, and I had another guy come up on me that was, I think he paced the half marathon because he came up with about 3 miles to go. He said, dude, you look better than anybody at this point. And I mean, I felt good. I felt like my knee drive was still being consistent, and I wasn't slugging. I was slowing down comparable to my 15 through 20 miles. But I was still running sub 5:45. So I was like, all right, I'm just going to keep it here. Just try to stay strong. And he's like, you look strong. He's like, there's two guys in front of you that are absolutely dying. And I was like, I saw one of them because he was in a bright yellow singlet, and I remember seeing him at the start line. So I kept my eyes on him, ended up passing him. And then I had my eye on this guy in front of me, and I was like, during the race, I was like, please be fifth place, because I was closing pretty good. But then the last 2 miles, I didn't make any ground up on him.
Really?
And so so at that point, I was like, please don't be fifth place. Please don't be fifth place. Because I kept telling myself, I was like, man, because I was like, it was one of those things that you think if you had like your goal on the line, you might be able to run faster, but the same rate, you don't know if you can or not. And so I just kept closing. At that point, I was just like, last mile, I was like, I'm going to just keep my eye on him. He's running hard, but I'm focused on the time at this point. Like I think I'm sub 2:30 if I finish this hard. Still a little delirious, not being able to really do math at this point. But I was like, I think even though I had to calculate 5 minutes, I'm like, I think I'm 2:30. No, I still really didn't know. So I tried to chase him down, couldn't end up getting him. But came through, was trying to finish. Honestly, didn't have any sort of kick in me. But luckily, the marathon ended at 26.2, because if it went 27:28, I would have fallen apart.
Yeah.
But I mean, I missed the last water stop, but it was more just like I didn't want to fight the half marathoners for it. At that point, it was 10 minutes left in the race. I'm like, I can just gut through it, because they were all, and there were 30 hovered around a table. I'm like, if I don't get water right here, it's not a big deal. Like it's not going to make or break anything. And ended up not hurting me too bad. But if I had to go any farther, I was toast. But it was beautiful marathon. I mean, they helped out. But that's sort of how the race went. Ended up coming across the line, and 2:29:30 on the dot is what I had. And so, but it was exciting. I came across, and I just remember like being just so thankful and enjoy it, like just so much just natural joy, just coming out in that moment. There was a picture going back that the race had posted. Just looking at one of the pictures that I posted of myself on my Instagram, was like you could see the clock, and like you saw in the background, you see the mountains and everything, and then there's me like crossing the finish line, and I like just smiling, just because as relieved as I was just to finish, like I never expected any of that out of myself, honestly. But a big part of that was I was just so thankful to have the opportunity to come out there and experience everything that I did. Even if I wouldn't have ran well, I still think I would have had that same sort of joyous feeling. Maybe not as much, but something similar, just because like there was so much beauty just in the 26 miles, from just the way the race was run, to just God's creation, and like everything I got to experience on the trip.
Man, that's amazing, just to be able to hear, especially the whole breakdown from the get-go, and of course at the very end or during, glorifying God still, to see it's like seeing His beauty, see what He truly created. Heck, I feel like every run I try to see that as much as I can, even though sometimes it's like, oh, it's the same route over and over again. But being able to experience something like this, like it's like kind of one of those like once in a lifetime type deals.
Yeah.
But then you go sign up for another marathon and find a bigger or better place or something like that. But man, that was a lot.
And that's one thing that I think it's going to make me reflect more in my running is like, cause like I thought it was absolutely beautiful out there, but like even when I've come back, I'm like, Kentucky's like gorgeous too.
Yeah.
And I take that for granted so much, running the same routes over and over and over. There were times this past year where I kept telling myself, like, all right, like this is a really pretty run. But a lot of it, I mean, a lot of times it wasn't giving thanks to God for that. But I think having just that thankfulness and that gratitude, a just mentally it gives you a positive mindset, and it will release some endorphins that are going to take away the pain a little bit just naturally. But I mean, obviously, it's a good just spiritual builder and a good way to connect with God and spend time talking to Him and just thanking Him just for the opportunities He's given you. I mean, that's what like running has sort of been for me at times, but for sure after this, I think when I get back in training, I'm definitely going to be more intentional about taking time to reflect on the opportunities that I have here to see God in running.
Mm-hmm. Good. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. All right. This is kind of two different questions, but actually I'll just say one first. You told me I texted you a couple days before. I was like, "How you feeling?" You kind of mentioned you were anxious. You were talking to Cumberland's coach, but so kind of not necessarily walk me through, but like maybe a brief. Why were you anxious? Or at what point did it switch over to like, okay, you were in focus mode, like in race mode? Were you still anxious all the way up until the gun? Was there excitement still? Like, how were you feeling? Where was your head at?
So we went out to NCCAAs in at the like near the end of middle of May, and I went out there, and that was probably closing out my training cycle. That might have been like the best week of training that I had. Put together 2 really quality workouts. Um, but once I came back from that, I really, really, I think I might have just overdone it a little too much, too hard. And coming back from that, I really felt sluggish for 2 or 3 weeks. And so at that point is when the anxiety started to build a little bit, especially because I told myself with my race plan, I mean, I'm used to going out slow. I told myself I'm going to go out there and I'm going to hit my pace from the get go.
Mm-hmm.
If I die, I die. But I kept in my head of like, I'm out here by myself. Like if something happens to me on the course, like Abigail's parents and like their family, they had to work. And so they weren't able to come out and watch. But I'm like, if something happens to me out here, no one's going to know besides like the race staff. And that's something I was like, I want my mom to know, or like somebody to be able to come like to the hospital, like, but literally no one would have any idea that something happened. And so that caused some anxiety because I knew I was going to hit it hard from the get go. And I knew I was really, really going to push the limits of what I could do physically. And so just that, knowing that it was going to hurt and like suck at times, like that caused some anxiety. But then my lack of just where I just felt weak for 2 or 3 weeks in training, like every single run felt tight. I tried to do 8 miles at marathon one day, had to cut it at 5. I went to do a 5-mile tempo, which is pretty standard in my training. Had to cut that short, try to do a progression where I started I think the goal was a 12-mile progression, cut it at 8, could barely even get down to marathon pace. And so for like 2 or 3 weeks, I was really just getting nervous. I'm like, man, I put all this work in and I'm just burnt. That caused some burnout physically. And then mentally too, it was just like, it's like, man, I'm ready for a break. Like I'm excited for this race, but like, I'm ready just to be done. And I mean, after that, I knew just traveling with going to Gulf Shores and stuff may wear on me a little bit. But I put together, whenever we were down in Gulf Shores, after we went out to watch Jacob's marathon, I put together a good workout down there. I did a 7-mile progression, and that sort of helped mentally boost me a little bit. Because even the day before that workout, we were sitting out on the beach, or I didn't even go to the beach because I'm like, I need to go do a workout. I was sitting out on the balcony and all the guys went out to the beach for a little bit. And I was like, I need to go do a workout. And then I told myself, I sat out there for a little bit. I was like, I don't want to run today. And I'm usually one, like, I want to run every single day. Like at least a little bit. And I told myself, I was like, I'm burnt out. I'm like, and I told myself, I was like, at that point, I'm not getting any fitter.
Mm-hmm.
So really, I just told myself I'm not going to stress about it. I'm going to enjoy my time down here with my team. So I went out there to the beach for a little bit with them, and I'm just pushing the workout another day. But I mean, that attitude sort of told like the mental burnout that I was feeling, even though I knew I wasn't losing fitness from pushing it back a day. But that caused just some anxiety because I didn't know where I was at physically or mentally, I guess. But I put that next day when I had a good workout, that was a boost. And then the Monday before I left, I did a workout. I went out and did, what was the workout? Let's see, I'll pull it up. I did a 2 mile, I did 1 mile tempo, a 3/4 mile at 10K, half a mile at 5K, and then a 1/4 mile at mile, all with a 1/4 mile recovery. Just did it out on the roads. So I did all that twice and hit everything dead on. Usually I'm not great with some of the faster stuff. I did the first 1/4 mile at that mile effort. After I got out of the first set, I told myself, I'm like, all right, I think this next set I might just do the mile and then the 3/4 mile. And that second set went by like a lot better. I mean, part of the reason why that I might have struggled through that because I was doing a carb depletion in the middle of all of that, just to prep for the carb load. And but once that workout clicked, I'm like, all right, I'm ready. My nerves were a little there, thinking that that workout might have been too much on me. But I was like, all right, I did that workout on Monday. I should be fine by Saturday. Even though I was tapering and it's a 10-mile day, did a long run the day before. And so I was like, I'm hoping it's not too much. Ended up not being too bad. But then I got out there to Utah, got out there on the Thursday, was still feeling a little just like it's hot. Like I got out there and it was 95 degrees because I got there in the middle of the day. Like I'm like, it is hot, which I'd planned on just taking off that day anyway because I was traveling all day, going to be on my feet. Had to wake up really early, just get to the airport and all that. But honestly, once I went out to pre-race, I was doing my pre-race out in Park City on the trail, like nice trails out there. And I was just like, man, I don't know if I want to run a marathon tomorrow because I was like, it was one of those, it was the first time probably in a few weeks where I like generally wanted to just keep running. And because I was like, it's so pretty out here. It's like, I don't want to run a marathon tomorrow because I want to run 10 miles a day. Like, just because it was so pretty. I ended up doing a 4-mile pre-race, added a mile because I usually do 3. Once I got done with that, I was sort of like, I got out there. My watch told me that my performance condition went down -4. And I was like, oh man, altitude's getting, but I didn't feel any of it. So it wasn't a big deal. But then I was just like, all right, I'm ready. Like I feel good. I feel fresh. My strides felt good afterwards. And I got to the race line. I woke up at 2 that morning, had my breakfast and coffee, got to the start line. I'm just like, honestly, there wasn't nerves. I was a lot less nervous at the start line.
You say you woke up at 2?
Yeah.
At 2 a.m.?
Yeah. So I woke up at 2 because the bus, I was about 35 to 40 minutes away from the bus stop that took you to the start line. And they started doing shuttles at 3:15 and quit at 4:15. But I'm like, I don't want to get there late and feel rushed. So I left their house at 2:30 and then got down there about 3:15. But that was one thing I flipped the switch is mentally. I'm out in Utah. So I was like, 2:00 is really like, it was like 4:00 in Campbellsville. Yeah. So I was like, it's not that early. So that's one, I'm a morning person anyway. Once I'm up. So I never felt tired, but that's just, even just mentally, I was just like, it's not that early. Like it's not bad. And so, but once I got on the bus, I was just talking and I just enjoyed the process of being there and going through everything. I didn't stress about it. Even at the start line, I was like, you had the butterflies a little bit, but I honestly wasn't like crazy nervous. It was more just like, I'm excited. I'm ready to get going. I know I'm going to have fun with this. And I did. The whole time, anytime I saw somebody at the water stop, like just talking, like, and if somebody was just cheering me on by myself, like, thanks. Like, because I knew I was out there by myself. I remember at one of the water stops, I played basketball at the water stop, like with my cup, just try to shoot it. And I made it. All the high school kids were like cheering me on. And that was like 15 miles deep. And I was like, yeah. And so something like that. Like I had fun with the whole process. And I think that made the anxiety go away. Just telling myself, this is like, you're running in a place special, that like, you're going to see God at work in this. So just have fun with it. And that's one thing I even tell my athletes all the time is like well, I know we put a lot of work in. I know you're stressed about it, but you're here because you love to run, and you love to race and compete. So go out there and have fun. When you work your tail off, you're going to have fun. And I mean, let God do the rest. Control what you control. Everything else, like, don't need to stress about it. And that's was a reoccurring thing I kept telling myself. Struggled with it a little bit in training, but once I got sort of out there and on the trip and was excited to travel, then that sort of flipped the switch.
Awesome. I just hit my 10-minute reminder, so I'm gonna set it for another 5 just in case. So I only got like 1 or maybe 1.5 questions that you should probably better run through pretty quick. Shoes. I think I saw you ran Hoka's Corbin. Is that right?
Yeah.
Would you recommend them? How'd you feel?
I loved them. I did the half marathon in Greenville with them, with Jacob. That was my first time running them. I don't do a lot of training in them. I'll do some of my marathon specific workouts with them. But I do my training in Clifton's for my easy mileage. And then I have the Adidas Addy Zero Boost, I think. I'd always raced in Adidas in my previous marathons. I'd raced in the Avantis, which are very similar to the Bostons, but they don't have, but they have more of a, they don't have a tongue, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Okay. They just fit. And so that's what I've raced my past ones in, but the Carbon X's are nice. And I think they helped out with some of the post-race recovery. Feel light, but you feel like you have a lot of support going in them.
Gotcha. Okay. I think I was going to show one of the pictures. I'm going to do that here in a second. I'm going to skip to this next one. Okay, you've had success basically in a short time of being a marathoner. Where do you find the most joy in training and racing for this distance? And what do you think we'll see you focusing on in the future? Obviously Boston, but anything further out than that?
I mean, right now, definitely focus is Boston. I love the long run. Definitely my favorite part of training. I changed my training up a little bit this past phase, and I've always loved just long, steady runs. But I was, even like on my recovery days, I would usually run longer recovery runs instead of doing 2-a-days. But that's one thing I switched up, is doing 2-a-days just to help out with recovery. But I absolutely love going out there and just knocking out 20 to 22 miles out on a Saturday morning, get done, have a big breakfast, and doing all that. I love food, so I like running a lot so I can eat a lot. Just another motivation to do that. And then I just love the marathon pace stuff. There's conflicting arguments on whether you should actually do workouts at marathon pace. Most people say you should either do faster than marathon pace or like recover. And so, but I like doing a lot of marathon pace stuff, whether it's a physical builder or not. If I can go out there and run a half marathon at marathon pace, it's a mental boost for me. And so I'll do a few workouts like that. That's what I enjoy there for sure. What was the second part of
that? Basically where your plan is afterwards.
Yeah. So focusing on Boston, I'd really love A goal. I'm setting at 225, B goal at 227. Boston, apparently in a course conversion, is actually a faster course than Utah Valley. And so my time converted to a 227.30. And so I was like, 227 would be a good B goal, 225 being the A goal. After Boston, I'm not 100% sure what I want to do. I've fallen in love with marathoning, but also at the same rate, I don't have any sort of foot speed. My 5Ks went downhill. And so before I know I can run marathons when I get older and still have some success there. You lose the foot speed as you age. And so before Utah Valley, I told myself, I was like, all right, I think my next goal after Boston would be, let's try to break 15 in a 5K. Now I'm on a marathon high, so we'll see where I'm at after Boston. Try to play with some things. I've hit an elite standard going sub 230 in the marathon, so I can get into a lot more races for free, and they'll pay for travel and things like that. So I may want to take advantage of that while I can, but it'll be more of a post-Boston decision. But those are the two big things I'm contemplating from there.
Gotcha. Okay, I know we have a few minutes left, and then I'm going to do a quick little either or, and then we're going to close.
Gotcha.
I heard you won a closer award. Tell me about that really quick.
So pretty much if you finish if they gave it to anybody who ran the second half of the marathon faster than the first half,
Yeah.
that was one of my goals because I knew they gave an award for that. And so I was, once I hit that halfway mark, I'm like, all right, I want that closer award. So
That's awesome.
I feel with that.
All right, so I have some quick little either or, lightning fast, be quick, and then we're gonna close.
All right.
Okay? So I'm gonna say one thing and you just say either one, okay?
Okay.
All right, city or country roads?
City.
Okay. West Coast or East Coast running?
I mean, right now coming out of Utah, it's gonna be West Coast.
Shorts or tights?
Shorts.
Marathon or steeplechase?
Ooh, marathon all day.
Peanut butter or Nutella?
Oh, peanut butter. I don't even like Nutella.
Yeah. Hot or cold weather to run in?
Hot.
Carbon fiber plates or full plates of food?
Oh man. Let's go full plates of food, honestly.
Okay, that's it. Okay. All right, so this is Corbin Harris. He just finished the Utah Valley Marathon, finished 10th overall, first in his age group, won the closer award, 2:29:30, I think, right?
Yep.
That's what it was exactly. So that's roughly around a 5:40-ish, just over 5:40 a mile.
Yep.
So thank you again for your time, and I think we made it under an hour.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. Definitely enjoyed it, and maybe we'll do this in the future. Maybe I'll be on the other end of this. You'll get another marathon in. So.
All right, sounds good.
All right. See you, buddy. Thanks.